Hello, fifth grade. Today we're going to start our American Revolution timeline. So what we're going to do is this first part, we're going to take some of the events that we covered in Chapter 10 about how tensions grow between the colonists and um, the King George III in Britain and Parliament, and we're going to start mapping them out. This timeline is going to take us over through like the next 3 chapters of events that we're going to cover, and so that's why there's a lot of pages. We're not going to do it in piecemeals, but as you go through it, first put your name on it. And what I want us to first note after you put your name is that we have 2 sides to our revolution. We have the Patriots, New England Patriots, my football fans, somewhat. And we have our loyalists, right? Our redcoats, those who are loyal to the king. So throughout this is red, by the way. It comes out orange on the camera, but it is red. All right. So throughout our timeline, we're going to be discussing events. Which events were a benefit towards the Patriots? Which benefits were a benefit to the Loyalists? All right. And we have this PDF. This is a very long document. We are, as I said, we're doing it in piecemeal. We are not going to do it all at once because it's just too much. Now, for each event, we're going to put this in chronological order, and actually, maybe don't use marker, use color pencil because that just blend through. We have events that go in order, right? We can see the arrows. We are going to be putting a date, and then you're going to draw a little picture, all right? Detailed picture. We don't want to see that much white. Use your color pencils, use coloring. And each of these events in our timeline, there is an image on the document, all right? So we're going to go back and start from our beginning of our chapter that we just talked about tensions, and we're going to talk about the French and Indian War. So there's images for each one, and I'm just using my document to cover the image because you're going to go back through and you're going to draw your pictures. All right, so we have the French and Indian War. So we have, this is the first event up at the top. I'm going to be writing the titles of the events on the top of each square, actually underneath a little bit better. So we have the French and Indian War. And when we do have a date, we will put a date. When we don't have a date, we'll do the best. I like to put the date on the actual arrow. Makes it a little easier to kind of follow. All right, so we have 1754 to 1763. Now, all the bullet points on these documents, you don't need to copy them word for word because obviously that's a really small space, but you're going to do your best to summarize it the best you can. So our first event we have is the French-Indian War. So in 1754, 1763, it was a war between the colonists. I'm going to fix this so it's going to fit both on here. There we go. Between the colonists, French natives, and England helps the colonists win the war, and there was a high cost. So kind of just being like a small summary of the events. And again, even though this was like the colonist-led revolt, England did help. All right, the Proclamation of 1763. The lands east of the Mississippi and west of the Appalachian Mountains belong to the natives. And we could probably add colonists had to move because there were already colonists living in that area. So in the box, you're going to draw a detailed drawing. I know it's a small little square, but you could draw a lot there. Use your pencil, color pencils, outline, draw. I was trying to find my versions that I have of my previous drawings, but I couldn't find any. All right, then we start to have our taxes. So this is, I did this in red, so this is the England pushing this. It's the Sugar Act of 1764, and the colonists should pay for the war. So Parliament, and this is a little tricky to see, made the colonies pay a tax on molasses and sugar. So molasses is like that dark, thick, viscous syrup substance. It's used in a lot of like sauces. Like if you've had barbecue sauce, you probably had something that has molasses in it. And that was a sweetener they used colonial times. It's more popular than the sugar that we're used to that's more refined and processed. Then we have the Committee of Correspondence. Now, I put 1764, but then 1772, because in 1772 is when the all of the colonies fully joined. So before 1764 was only some of the colonies, but eventually all of them get on board. Oops, forgot the Sugar Act. And the Committee of Correspondence, news traveled slowly, so they use the committee to share news about what is going on in other colonies. So it's just like it's actually probably not the correct picture of the Committee of Correspondence. That looks more of like a government, but we get the idea. Committee of group of colonies sharing news together. 1765 was the Stamp Act. Parliament made the colonies pay a tax on all paper documents, and that was when we had James Otis give the speech of "No taxation without representation is tyranny," and these were the examples of stamps that the collectors or British soldiers would stamp goods when they found. Let me just lift up a little bit. And our last event for today is the Townsend's Act. And the Townsend Act was an act on all imports, including tea. So here's an example of, I'm saying this looks more like Parliament. And these are both British imposed, Parliament imposes those acts. All right, and our next day, so we're just going to do a few events for each lesson. So you're going to go through, write these in, and then do your pictures.